Hello and welcome to Imperfect Nutrition. I am your host, Stephanie. Today we're talking about why do we emotionally eat? So I am someone that definitely emotionally eats from, time to time. I definitely will eat out of emotions. And I think emotionally eating really gets a bad rap. We think of emotional eating and we automatically think of people that binge eat or overeat, but sometimes emotional eating isn't even that. Emotional eating can actually be even, a happy thing, right? Sometimes we eat when we're sad, sometimes we eat when we're happy, sometimes we eat when we're celebrating. There's many reasons why people eat, and a lot of the times it has nothing to do about hunger. So just because you eat something doesn't automatically mean that you are hungry. So I know when I'm emotionally eating out of a place of, maybe procrastinating, maybe I'm bored, maybe I'm upset. Like I have this very distinct memory. I think it was in high school. I got in a fight with my boyfriend and I had all of these, like, I don't know what they're called. They're like these little toffee, like chocolate things. They have chocolate on the top and it's like toffee and it has like a nut on the bottom. What are they called? I don't know. Anyways, I remember having a box of those and just eating them and sobbing and talking to my mom on my bed and just being like so upset. And I was just eating this chocolate. And I guess in that moment, it was making me feel good. It was comforting me. And I think from a very, very young age, I had that relationship with food. When I would eat, I would feel comfort. So sometimes this like kind of behavior can become like maladaptive, meaning it might not serve us in the best way. So you might be doing a behavior that you did from a very young age, or just maybe something you picked up in the last couple of years because this somehow helped you with coping with something, right? So for me, a lot of times when I felt upset or sad or just even bored, honestly boredom's like one of the big ones for me, I would just end up like grazing on food and just snacking. And even like to this day, I still do that sometimes. But the difference is that I notice it. So sometimes if I'm like, I will eat breakfast and then I'm just like, oh, like I'm still feeling hungry. I feel like I need more carbohydrates. And then all of a sudden I've eaten a whole entire thing of rice cakes, like a whole entire sleeve of rice cakes. And I'm like, why did I even do that? And then I realized I wasn't even that hungry. So something that I do now when I emotionally eat, or I notice that I'm emotionally eating, I'll like kind of check in with myself. So if I eat something and I'm like, oh, I'm still really hungry, I want to still eat something, I check in with myself. How am I feeling right now? Am I anxious? Am I avoiding doing something? Sometimes it's avoiding getting work started. So sometimes I'll get a little bit anxiety of just getting the day started. So instead of getting the day started, I'll start procrastinating by being like, oh, I just need to eat a little bit more. I just need to eat a little bit more. And then I'm just in the kitchen, just eating a little bit more, just eating a little more. Oh, I'll start after I'm done eating this, right? So it's a way of like procrastinating and almost like self sabotaging. I don't know if that like relates with you guys or if you felt that way. Or even when like I've been bored, I remember like just being I have like a lot of distinct memories of just being in high school and just being bored and just being like, what can I do with myself? Like, you're a teenager, you don't have a car yet, you be like, you hang out with friends and stuff, but like sometimes you're just like, you're by yourself. There's times when you're a teenager where you're just by yourself, right? And I'm like, what do I do, right? What do I do? So I would just like eat food, right? Because I'm like, that kind of entertains me, the whole entire like cooking process and like making something for myself and like sitting and like watching like a DVD or something like that. Yeah, like that's how old I am. There was like we watched DVDs. Or I remember like watching, what was this big show that was out, like there was like the OC, One Tree Hill, things like that. I would like go and make like a bunch of food and just like sit there and watch in front of the TV and like eat food. Like I have like distinct memories of just being on the couch and eating food and watching TV, and that was like somehow very, very comforting, and it really just eases my boredom, right? But now, knowing what I know about nutrition, it's I like notice these things and I'm like, why am I doing this? Am I like, for me, most part, it's like I'm avoiding something, right? Usually it's I'm avoiding something. I'm avoiding discomfort of being bored. I'm avoiding, starting work, feeling that anxiety, kind of like when you wake up in the morning. That's not for everyone, but for me in general, I have a lot more anxiety in the morning than I do at nighttime. So waking up in the morning, like having that anxiousness and like getting the day started, and it's just like, is the food really going to help me in this moment? Is that where I'm going to get that relief, or is it by just starting something, right? So for instance, if it's work, it's just like, okay, just bite the bullet, start with one thing that you can do, right? And even if it's not work, like for me, sometimes just going to the gym, getting to the gym, getting my workout in, getting those anxious feelings out is going to make me feel better than me crushing a whole sleeve of freaking rice cakes. Like so freaking lame, but like, or like one of those crispy mini bags. I can eat a whole bag of those crispy mini bags. That's going to make me feel better than doing that. So like kind of weighing out the pros and cons. Like, is this actually going to serve me? Is this going to serve me for my goals? Am I trying to avoid something right now? What is something that I can do that would be more productive and make me feel better, right? Because, eating out of emotion isn't really a bad thing. I don't think it is. Emotionally eating is not a terrible thing. Like I said, it's probably something that you learned at a very young age. Maybe like you just didn't, I don't know, I didn't really have like a lot of friends. So like maybe it was a way of, easing boredom, comforting yourself, just making you feel better, or just feeling like kind of warm, right? Like comfort food is a thing. We eat comfort food because it makes us feel good. It eases that uncomfortability that we feel in our bodies sometimes, right? So emotional eating, like I don't think it's inherently bad. It's like when it gets to a point where, like I said, you are, eating a whole entire row of cookies, you are, going back to the fridge and finishing off like the ice cream, you're doing those type of things, and then you start feeling guilty and you start feeling shameful after. This is where it can like kind of get a little bit tricky. And then if say you have fitness goals and stuff like that, you're like, why did I do this again? Why did I do this again? Right? So I always like to come to a place of like, where can I bring awareness, right? How can I realize the actions I'm doing, bring awareness? Before you can actually like do anything about it, you have to be aware of when you're doing it, why you're doing it, where is this actually coming from, before you can tackle it and like have some sort of game plan for it. So like for me, if I notice after I eat that I'm like, oh, I'm still hungry, I delay it. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm going to delay that. I'm going to drink some water, have a coffee, see how I actually feel. Am I actually hungry? Right? Because there's been so many times that I'm not actually hungry and I'll eat that food and then I'll feel bloated and then I'll feel uncomfortable. And I'm like, why did I do that? So I think it's important to like kind of recognize those things and have things in place for yourself. I don't like to practice things when we're already in a crisis. This is what people do. They're just like, okay, when you're in a crisis, do deep breaths. When you're in a crisis, when you're super stressed out, just take a deep breath. It's like you don't think of that shit when you're actually in it, right? So the thing to do is start creating awareness. So not just awareness when you're in trouble, but awareness of just everything you're doing. So after every meal, checking in with yourself. How do I feel? Do I feel satisfied? Do I feel like I need to eat more? Am I feeling good? Am I feeling calm? Or am I feeling more anxious? Am I feeling uncomfortable? Recognize those things. Start doing that with every single meal that you do, right? And the more that you practice that, when you're actually in a space where you're like, you feel like you're emotional eating, or it's going to be like an overeating session, you can catch on to that a lot faster and recognize where these thoughts, where these feelings are coming from, and be able to actually make a game plan from there, right? So like I said, for me, I check in with myself quite often after I eat a meal, and I like ask myself these questions. Am I actually hungry? Do I feel satisfied? Am I avoiding something? Right? And do I just feel bored? Maybe I should just go for a walk. Maybe I'll go for a walk and come back and see if I'm still hungry. If I'm still hungry, I'm gonna go eat something, right? But like, you're not gonna die if you take 20 minutes, go for a walk, do something else, and come back to it. The food's still going to be there. Trust me, the food's still gonna be there. So if you want it later, you can definitely have it later. But I think it's important to bring that awareness, have something that you can do instead, and then be able to, like, do this on a time that you actually need it, right? Like, think about when you, I guess, like, I'm just thinking of like sports. So if you were practicing a sport, like, for instance, like when I would play soccer, if I only practiced corner kicks, or I only practiced free kicks in a game, that's under high pressure. That's why you practice it at practice, right? So it's the same thing with your food, right? You have to be able to practice these things even when it doesn't seem like there's a problem. And a lot of times we think like, oh no, I'm so good at this now. I haven't binged ate, I haven't overate, I haven't been emotionally eating for a really long time. I have this under control. And then all of a sudden your life gets stressed out, something happens, and you just go back into the same patterns. So do these things, practice these things, even when you feel good. I think it's better to practice things when you feel good and you feel on top of the world, rather than only when you're in crisis, because it's not going to work. It's just not going to help. Like I said, it's like telling someone to deep breathe when they're having an anxiety attack. It just is not going to work if they never actually practice that, right? So, practice these things when you're in a good headspace, right? Bring awareness to these things when you're in a good headspace. Just make it part of your life. It's just becoming like more mindful of how you feel and checking in with yourself and asking these questions. And again, emotional eating doesn't even have to be that bad, right? Like when you celebrate at Christmas time or Easter or any sort of holiday that you may have, is that a bad thing, celebrating with your friends and family? The food, like that's a good emotional connection and it feels good, right? That's not inherently a bad thing. It's when we feel, maybe when we go to these dinners, oh, I feel really anxious, I'm like worried about overeating, or like maybe maybe I won't be able to stop myself, and you're like hyping yourself up about this and you're putting like a negative connotation on it when it doesn't actually have to be that, you know? A lot of times we think like, oh, the food's gonna run away. I don't know, maybe for some families it's like that. I know for at least Paul's family, like eating with them is just like, oh, you better get that food because the boys are gonna get it, right? So it's very dependent on the family, but like, you can always take leftovers home. You don't have to go in for seconds. You can always take leftovers home. You can always like freeze a dessert if you want to have it later. There's so many things you can do. The food's not gonna run away. It's always gonna be there. Take 20 minutes. And also, like, you're like, oh, like, I'm not gonna have this again for a really long time, I'm gonna miss this opportunity. Honestly, probably not. There's probably going to be another time that you're going to be able to have a limited time donut or something, or a limited time cookie or whatever it may be. Or, if you do have these fitness goals, like get one, put it in the freezer, and you can eat it later. Like, especially if you're like someone that's prepping for a show, or you have a photo shoot, or you have this timeline, like a wedding or something like that, then you can definitely just take that, put it in the freezer, and you can eat it after. And 9 times out of 10, I always forget about it. I put it in the freezer. I'm going to eat this later. I'm like thinking about it like, oh, I'm going to have this later. And then when the time comes, I'm like, what the hell is all this like shit doing in the freezer? And I just like throw it in the garbage. So it's like, is it wasteful? I don't know. Like, honestly, like there's a lot of things that you think that you do need, you don't actually. But in that moment, maybe it would make you feel better if you did that. I don't know. And now I'm just like kind of just like absolutely rambling. Is this even about emotional eating anymore? I don't know. Hopefully, I'm going to stop saying I don't know. And I'm just going to wrap this up. All right, guys. If you found this valuable, please let me know. Let me know what your biggest takeaway is. And we will talk soon. Bye.